Imagine sitting beside a crackling fire nearly 100,000 years ago. The night is cold. Your stomach is empty. Somewhere beyond the glow of the flames, a huge predator is moving through the darkness. You spot it before anyone else. You need to warn the person sitting across from you. Today that would be easy. You'd simply say, "Look out." But there was a time in human history when those words didn't exist. No language, no conversations, no stories, no names, just silence. And that raises one of the most fascinating questions in science. How did humans go from creatures incapable of speech to a species that writes novels, records podcasts, argues politics, and sends billions of messages every day? How did language begin? The challenge is that language leaves behind almost no evidence. Bones fossilize, tools survive, paintings remain on cave walls, but spoken words vanish the moment they are spoken. No archaeologist has ever unearthed a fossilized sentence. No ancient conversation has been preserved underground. Language disappears into the air. That means researchers studying its origins must act like detectives reconstructing a crime scene with almost no physical clues. They examine skulls, they study ancient bones, they analyze genetics, they compare living animals, and from those scattered pieces, they attempt to reconstruct one of humanity's greatest inventions. Before we can understand where language came from, we need to understand what language actually is. Because communication and language are not the same thing. Animals communicate constantly. Honeybees perform intricate dances that reveal the location of flowers. Dolphins use signature whistles that function almost like personal names. Chimpanzees use calls, gestures, and facial expressions to convey information. Communication clearly existed long before humans appeared. So the real mystery isn't communication. The mystery is language. At some point, communication crossed a threshold and became something entirely different. To understand that difference, think about signals and symbols. A signal has a direct connection to what it represents. A growling dog communicates danger because the growl itself is part of the threat. The message and the meaning are linked together. Symbols work differently. Take the word danger. Nothing about those sounds is naturally dangerous. The word doesn't resemble danger. It doesn't sound threatening. It only means something because people collectively agree that it does. That's the remarkable thing about language. Every word you've ever spoken exists because millions or billions of people share the same mental agreement. Language is a system of abstract symbols, and somewhere in our distant past, humans learned how to create and understand those symbols. That leap changed everything. The question is when it happened. Researchers generally fall into two major camps. The first believes language emerged gradually. According to this view, simple animal-like calls slowly became more sophisticated over hundreds of thousands of years. Each generation added a little more complexity until eventually full language appeared. This idea is known as the continuity hypothesis. Supporters point to chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas. These animals already display limited forms of symbolic thinking. Some can learn signs, others can combine symbols in new ways. Many appear to understand that objects have labels. Perhaps language is simply the end result of a very long evolutionary journey. But another group disagrees. They argue that language appeared much more suddenly. According to this theory, something extraordinary happened between roughly 100,000 and 50,000 years ago. A genetic change, a neurological breakthrough, a critical threshold in brain development, something that unlocked a completely new level of thinking. Specifically, the ability to create recursive language. That means ideas nested inside other ideas, sentences inside sentences, thoughts embedded within thoughts. For example, the man who knows the woman who found the dog. That level of complexity is uniquely human. Supporters of the discontinuity hypothesis believe there was a moment when the human brain suddenly gained this ability. Language didn't slowly grow. It exploded. The truth may lie somewhere between these two extremes. But before language could emerge, humans first needed the physical equipment to produce it. Speech isn't just mental, it's mechanical. Your brain may create language, but your body must deliver it. And for much of evolutionary history, our ancestors lacked the necessary anatomy. One of the most important structures involved is the larynx, commonly known as the voice box. In most mammals, including chimpanzees, the larynx sits high in the throat. This arrangement has advantages. Animals can breathe and swallow more easily at the same time. The risk of choking is reduced. It's an efficient design, but it comes with a major limitation. A high larynx restricts the variety of sounds an animal can produce. Humans are different. Our larynx sits much lower. That lower position creates a larger vocal chamber inside the throat. As air moves through this chamber, it can be shaped into a far wider range of sounds. Vowels, consonants, complex speech, all become possible. But evolution demanded a price. Because of our low larynx, humans are unusually vulnerable to choking. Every year, thousands of people die because food enters the airway instead of the esophagus. In a sense, evolution accepted a dangerous compromise. The ability to speak was apparently valuable enough to justify the risk. Exactly when the larynx descended remains uncertain. Soft tissue rarely fossilizes. Ancient voice boxes do not survive for scientists to examine, which means researchers must rely on indirect clues. And one clue comes from a very unusual bone, the hyoid, a small U-shaped bone suspended in the throat. Unlike every other bone in your body, it doesn't connect directly to another bone. Instead, it hangs in place, supported by muscles and ligaments. Those muscles play a crucial role in speaking, which makes the hyoid incredibly important for understanding ancient vocal abilities. In 1989, researchers discovered a remarkably preserved hyoid bone in a Neanderthal burial site in Israel. The bone was approximately 60,000 years old. When scientists examined it, they were stunned. Its shape was almost identical to that of modern humans. The findings suggested that Neanderthals may have possessed the physical ability to produce complex speech, and that discovery opened an entirely new chapter in the story of language. The discovery of a human-like hyoid bone in Neanderthals was already remarkable, but then genetics entered the story, and things became even more intriguing. In 2002, scientists identified a gene that would quickly become one of the most discussed genes in human evolution. Its name was FOXP2. Almost immediately, headlines began calling it the language gene. Geneticists hated that description, not because FOXP2 wasn't important, but because the nickname oversimplified a much more complicated reality. No single gene creates language. Language involves countless regions of the brain and an enormous network of biological processes. Still, FOXP2 was special. Researchers discovered that people carrying damaged versions of the gene often experience serious difficulties with speech and language. They struggle with grammar. They have trouble controlling the precise muscle movements required for speaking. Simple conversations become extraordinarily challenging. Clearly, FOXP2 played a significant role in human communication. What made the discovery truly exciting was how unusual the human version appeared to be. FOXP2 exists in many animals. Mice have it, birds have it, even reptiles possess versions of the gene. But the human form contains two specific mutations not found in chimpanzees or most other mammals. These changes appear to have undergone strong positive selection. In other words, evolution strongly favored them. Something about these mutations provided a major advantage, and that naturally led researchers to wonder, could FOXP2 have helped make language possible? Then came another breakthrough. Scientists managed to extract DNA from Neanderthal remains. For the first time, researchers could compare the genes of modern humans and Neanderthals directly. When they examined FOXP2, they found something astonishing. Neanderthals possessed the same key mutations, the exact same ones. That discovery changed the conversation immediately. If both species shared these genetic adaptations, then the mutations must have appeared long before modern humans emerged. The common ancestor of humans and Neanderthals lived more than 400,000 years ago, which means important biological foundations for speech may already have existed at that time. Suddenly, language looked much older than many scientists had imagined. By at least 400,000 years ago, our ancestors likely possessed much of the genetic machinery needed for advanced vocal communication. By 60,000 years ago, Neanderthals apparently had throat structures capable of producing complex sounds. And somewhere during that long stretch of evolutionary history, the human brain developed the capacity to transform sounds into symbols. Yet one enormous mystery remained. What were the first words? Nobody knows. and we may never know. But that hasn't stopped researchers from proposing theories. Some of those theories are serious, others sound almost comedic. One of the oldest explanations is known as the bow-wow theory. Its basic idea is simple. Early humans supposedly created words by imitating sounds from nature. The bark of a dog, the rumble of thunder, the hiss of a snake. Modern languages certainly contain examples of this process. Words such as buzz, hiss, and crash closely resemble the sounds they describe. These are called onomatopoeic words. The problem is that this only explains a tiny portion of language. It may account for words like buzz, but it doesn't explain concepts like freedom, or justice, or tomorrow. Sooner or later, language requires symbols that bear no resemblance to what they represent. Another proposal became famous largely because of its unforgettable name, the poo-poo theory. Yes, that is the actual historical term. According to this idea, language began with instinctive emotional sounds, cries of pain, laughter, gasps of surprise, sighs of relief. Humans and many animals naturally produce these sounds without conscious effort. Supporters argued that spoken language evolved from such emotional vocalizations. The difficulty is that these sounds are mostly involuntary. Language, on the other hand, requires deliberate control. You choose your words. You arrange them intentionally. That transition remains difficult to explain. Then there is the yo-he-ho theory. This hypothesis suggests language emerged from coordinated labor. Imagine a group of early humans dragging a massive log, or rowing together, or lifting a heavy stone. Rhythmic sounds help synchronize movement. The repeated chants and grunts used during collective work may have gradually developed into more structured vocal systems. Interestingly, modern work songs and sea shanties preserve something similar, and many researchers believe music and language share deep evolutionary roots. Some even argue that humans may have sung before they truly spoke. Another theory, known as the ta-ta theory, proposed something even stranger. Its supporters suggested that speech originated from gestures. As people moved their hands, their mouths supposedly began imitating those movements through sound. Most modern linguists reject the idea in its original form. Yet the broader connection between gestures and language remains surprisingly important. In fact, many researchers take the gesture hypothesis very seriously, because when we examine the brain, an interesting pattern appears. One of the major language regions in the human brain is known as Broca's area. This region helps coordinate speech production, but it is also closely connected to areas responsible for fine hand movements. In other primates, similar brain regions appear heavily involved in processing gestures and facial expressions. The overlap is difficult to ignore. Perhaps language didn't begin with speech at all. Perhaps it began with movement. There is additional evidence supporting this possibility. Consider pointing. Pointing may be one of the most fundamental communicative acts humans perform. A simple gesture that says, "Look over there. Pay attention to that. Notice what I'm noticing." Human infants learn to point before they learn to speak, and in the wild, chimpanzees rarely point the way humans do. The ability seems deeply connected to our unique social cognition. Some researchers believe gestures created the foundation upon which spoken language was later built. In that scenario, language first existed in the hands. The voice merely joined the conversation later. But regardless of whether language began with sounds, gestures, or both, another ingredient was absolutely essential: a particular type of intelligence, one that may have been even more important than anatomy or genetics: the ability to understand other minds. Without that ability, language could never have evolved. And that brings us to one of the most extraordinary features of the human brain, a feature known as theory of mind. Imagine for a moment that you possess the perfect voice. You have a modern human throat, a descended larynx, the right genetic mutations, a brain capable of producing thousands of different sounds. Would that be enough to create language? Surprisingly, no, because language requires something much deeper than anatomy. It requires understanding that other people have minds. This ability is known as theory of mind, and it may be one of the most important cognitive breakthroughs in human history.